Hello everybody. This has been a very irregular week. It started off irregular, but I thought I could pull it together and get a video made, but then other irregular things happened, and here we are. I have nothing ready, and it's time for a video. So, instead, we're going to talk about some books that I've read recently. This is going to be a very, very informal chat. One book that I read a few weeks ago was The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This is a book that is about a housebound woman who likes to watch her neighbors outside her window, and one day she believes she sees the woman across the way being murdered. I was hooked by three things: the initial premise of the book cover, which is great, and by the rumor I heard that it had a lot of Hitchcock references, a lot of classic film references, and then when my hold finally came in on the ebook and I opened it up, the first thing I saw was a quote before the book starts, a line from Shadow of a Doubt, which many of you may know is tied with Rear Window for my favorite Hitchcock film. I love Shadow of a Doubt. It was the first video I did in my Hitchcock review series, and I was just so excited. The thing about starting a book on such a high level of enthusiasm, at least for me, is that it becomes even more of a challenge for the book to maintain that high level of excitement and anticipation, and often it declines, and it doesn't hold that up all the way to the end. And that's what happened here, unfortunately. I didn't love the book. At first I was really into it. I was engaged by the story, the writing. It's very fast-paced, it's a page-turner, it grips you by the throat, and it just keeps you going. But somewhere around the 60 to 70% mark, I started to lose interest. I didn't care so much about what really happened. I was ready for it all to be done. There are two big reveals, two plot twists, and I wasn't terribly impressed with either of them, so there's that. Plus, I got tired of the protagonist. At first, I liked her, and I felt so sympathetic for her. She's agoraphobic, she's got lots of psychological trauma that she's working through. Then, I don't know, she was just so reckless and irresponsible with some of her responses to things that would happen, some of the ways that she would respond to people who came in, who entered her world. I just felt like, why are you saying this to them, or why are you treating them this way? It really doesn't make sense, or doesn't seem like a good idea. She also has a problem with drug and alcohol abuse, which becomes more and more apparent as the book goes on, and her psychiatrist ups her medication and makes her promise not to take it with alcohol, but then she does, and then she's going around wondering, why won't anybody believe me when I tell them that I saw these things? They all think I'm hallucinating, and it's like, well, yeah, because that's what can happen when you mix your drugs, your pills, with your booze, and it's just so many things that are just not a good idea, but she does them anyway. She just makes poor choices, and I found it frustrating to read. So, on the flip side, I got a lot of classic film, noir, suspense, movie recommendations from the book. I had a list going. There were a lot of movies mentioned that I had seen, so I understood the references, and that was exciting. Also, some books were mentioned, so I liked that, and there were plenty of Hitchcock references, and every time that happened, it was pleasant, but that alone was not enough to make me love the book. So after I finished The Woman in the Window, I wanted to read something that I knew pretty well that I would enjoy, so I went for an old favorite, Terry Pratchett. I read Reaper Man, which is, I don't know, number something, 13, 11, I don't know, I'll put the correct number down here, in the Discworld series. It is a book that is focused on death as the prominent character. I love death. That doesn't sound right, but those of you who have read Terry Pratchett's Discworld books know who I'm referring to when I say that, and he is one of my two favorite characters. Sam Vimes is my other favorite, and it was everything that I hoped it would be. It was funny. Death has an existential crisis, which you wonder how that's even possible because he's Death, but Death is a very complex character, very lovable character. This was also kind of a wizard's book, and I don't love the wizards. I've only read a couple other wizards books, but I liked them in this one. They were very crazy, and one of them dies, but because Death has retired and basically gone AWOL before there's a new Death to take his place, there's too much life force in the world, and so everything that's supposed to die doesn't, and other things that shouldn't have life come to life, or something like that. I can't really explain it. This wizard who was supposed to die does not die, so then he is going around undead. I love the community of people, undead people, that he comes in contact with. The resident zombie of the Discworld series is there, as well as a vampire and his wife who are trying to live the posh vampire lifestyle, complete with all the cliches, but they're really not that kind of people. And there's a banshee and a very shy boogeyman, and I think that was my favorite part. Anyway, that was a really fun read, and just what I needed after an intense thriller. And then after that, as I like to mix up the genres that I read a suspense thriller, and then I read a fantasy comedy, and then I move on to a classic dramatic novel. I read, finally, Agnes Grey by Brontë. I mentioned that I was going to read this a few months ago. I think it was when I reviewed the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I think I gave the impression that I was going to pick it up right away, and that was months ago. This is normal for me. It takes me a long time to get to things. But I finally did read it. I still have the copy of it right here. It's a short book. Relatively short. This copy was only 194 pages long. This is the second Anne Brontë novel that I've read. The first one was her more famous novel, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which I liked. I found it surprising. There were a lot of things that I thought, wow, it's amazing that something like this was written at the time that it was. Agnes Grey is different from The Tenant of Wildfell Hall in terms of subject matter, but a lot of the themes are the same. Anne Brontë was kind of a social reformer. She writes with a very sharp pen with regard to upper classes and hypocrisies within the church and hypocrisies of the rich toward the poor. She has a lot to say about a lot of different people. This book is focused on a young woman, Agnes Grey, who decides she wants to become a governess. Her family has gone through some difficult financial circumstances, and so to help out, even though none of them want her to do this, and they treat her as if she's the family pet, she's the baby of the family, she says, no, I want to go and have an adventure, do my own thing, be an independent person. So she applies and she gets this position, and it's not what she hopes it would be. Now, she is kind of naive about the whole thing. She has no experience with children going into it. Her philosophy is, I was a child, so I will know how to deal with children because I remember how I was dealt with when I was younger, and I will do the same thing. Not taking into consideration that maybe she was a very well-behaved child, and the children that she's going to get in her new position are little monsters, which they turn out to be. These kids, they are awful. But as bad as the children are, I think the parents are even worse, and Brontë goes to great lengths to show how ridiculous and frivolous and rude and cruel the parents and other adults are, in comparison, the children, they're just mimicking what they see their adult role models do. So she is mistreated, she's disrespected. There are a lot of things that Agnes Grey puts up with that I know in her shoes I would not have been able to take it. I would have lashed out and said something and gotten fired. But it was really interesting to compare her situation, her experience as a governess, with Jane Eyre's. Compared to Agnes, Jane Eyre had it really good. She was trained to be a teacher. She had plenty of experience. She got to go to her first position as a governess, and there was no parent/guardian interference. She got to connect with the child, and Adele was a pretty well-behaved kid. She wasn't the brightest bulb in the circuit, and she had some issues, but really, a good kid. And they had a really good connection, and then when the parent/guardian did show up, he didn't care, he wasn't going to interfere. But so many of the parents in this book, well, there are only 2 sets of parents that she has to deal with because she goes to 2 different situations, and they were awful. There is a little romance in the book that's kind of a silver lining to the cloud. It's not incredibly romantic romance. She is writing these confessions of a governess, basically, and she edits a lot out. She's very self-conscious about saying anything that makes her look foolish or discreditable, and so anything that has to do with the heart, she kind of pushes that to the side. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to tell you everything that was said in this conversation. So if you're looking for a nice romance novel, this really isn't it. But I did like it. I thought it was very stimulating. Not always the most encouraging or happy thing, but Agnes Grey is a very strong, moralistic character, and she sticks by what she believes is right, and so that is the general tone of this book. It is very strong in its traditional Christian themes. Anyway, those are my thoughts on 3 books that I've read recently. If you have any thoughts on them, go ahead and share them in the comments below. I'm always curious to know what you guys think of anything that I mention. Hopefully we will be back on track with our movie reviews next week. I'm already working on them, so that's a good sign, right? I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye!